Already did.
Okay, good. All right, well, it's the top of the hour, so let's get started. I know more people will be joining us. Thank you all for joining us today to learn more about the Respect for People Roadmap, an innovative methodology for preparing your organization for continuous improvement. I'm Bruce Hamilton from the GBMP Consulting Group, and together with my teammates from GBMP, Melinda Manette and Ron Pujalte, we want to welcome Scott Gauvin, the creator of Respect for People Roadmap, who for the next hour will lead us through the approach and the remarkable benefits of RFP. I should mention, as we begin, that Melinda, Ron, and I have previously completed this remarkable program and may interject from time to time during Scott's presentation. So, welcome, Scott.
Thank you. I hope that you do interject. So welcome everyone. So I'm Scott Gauvin. I'm a longtime operations consultant, and as Bruce mentioned, the co-founder of the Respect for People Roadmap. So thank you all of you for checking it out and being here today. Today we're going to talk about what really drives continuous improvement success, and it's not just tools or methodologies. It's about establishing really the right behaviors and building the kind of culture where CI can really take root. When behaviors are consistent and the culture supports them, real, measurable, and lasting impacts start to become possible. And so we'll also share kind of what the turnkey solution is that we're talking about here, the Respect for People roadmap that we've created to help us kind of get there. Whatever methodology you use to pursue operational excellence, whether it's Lean or Shingo or Six Sigma or Agile or Theory of Constraints or something else, there's always kind of a critical connection between continuous improvement and culture. You can have the best tools and techniques in the world, but if the culture doesn't support the behaviors needed to sustain them, really the improvement efforts are going to stall out. So culture is what carries the work forward. It shapes how people engage with the change and how they solve problems, how they collaborate, and ultimately whether CI becomes a way of life or just some other initiative in the program. So every continuous improvement methodology from Lean and Shingo to Six Sigma and Theory of Constraints, they all recognize kind of a fundamental truth that people are central to its success. And so take Lean, for example, it's built explicitly on the foundation of respect for people and continuous improvement. It empowers employees to really actively identify problems and implement improvement. It encourages the leaders to build trust and collaboration and engagement within the organization, and it's supposed to treat people not just as resources, but as the kind of the key drivers of innovation and in progress for the change efforts.
And you know, Scott, when you're talking, it reminds me of the first time that I was really exposed to a true lean transformation. And you and I have had this discussion, you know, which comes first, this left-hand side of the model where you've got tools and systems, and on the right-hand side, the respect for people side. And so when we first got started many years ago, we were very focused on tools, and a lot of our clients are. And one of our first forays was let's try 5S. And we did that as the leadership team, and we really had the best intentions in mind of going to the shop floor and doing a learning lab where we started in one area, and we did all 5 steps. And we were there sorting out with the employees what they needed and setting them in place and scrubbing the floors to make it shine. And we put in the auditing systems. And it just stagnated. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until we said, let's actually put the tool aside for a moment and be really intentional about what we wanted to do, which was to influence small, rapid improvements throughout the factory. And then we went to do our direct observation with that in mind, of how is work happening today? And what are the challenges for our people? And putting ourselves in our employees' shoes of how difficult it was to get the job done. Mm-hmm. And then the tools came because they were the answer to how do we change the culture, as opposed to let's start with the tools and change the culture as a result.
Yeah.
It's that synergy between the two that you bring up that
Yeah. 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 And that's been my experience. It's where you can bring those two elements, the continuous improvement and the respect for people, together collectively and cohesively, is where really that's kind of where the magic starts to spark, in my experience. Awesome. Thank you, Melinda. Um, Also wanted to kind of talk about the Shingo model. Shingo takes this a little bit even further, placing kind of a strong emphasis on culture and leadership behaviors as the foundation for sustainable improvement. It explicitly centers around kind of the principle of respect for every individual. It calls for building a culture rooted in humility, trust, and continuous learning. And it really challenges leaders to model the behaviors that create those conditions for real and lasting change. And in the Shingo framework, it's clear improvement follows behavior. They talk about this very explicitly, right? And behavior is shaped deeply by those cultural values. And I know you guys at GBMP do a lot with Shingo. So I don't know if you
Yeah,
want to share any stories there.
Scott, as an affiliate of the Shingo Institute, GBMP has actually been teaching these workshops since 2012. So we've seen a lot of companies, and the principle respect for every individual is probably the most fundamental of the 10 Shingo principles. And it's probably generated more conversation than just about any others. It's one of the first that we talk about in the workshops because it's at the base of the Shingo pyramid. And so I wanted to just tell a story about a recent workshop, and maybe this has happened to me before, but there was an attendee who confided in the class. We kind of have the mantra that what happens at Shingo stays in Shingo. And so she confided that her organization talked a good game about continuous improvement, but that only a small number of employees were really charged up about solving problems. And so she's asking me, what's our problem? But the funny thing is, while she was talking, I could see, peripheral vision is very telling. I could just see these knowing smiles on virtually everybody else in the room. Everybody else in the class was kind of nodding and saying, "Oh yeah, we've been there." So the problem is clearly not an isolated case. It's more like an epidemic, and I think that's my attraction to this process of really drilling in to what we mean by respect for people. I see it as, the Shingo workshops are great, but they're basically a 2-day workshop that tells you what goods looks like. They don't necessarily tell you how to get there. And the Respect for People roadmap is more of the antidote to that engagement problem.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Bruce. The next one I wanted to kind of explore a little bit is Six Sigma. It also recognizes that people are essential to making improvement stick. It's not just about data and processes. I remember my foray into Six Sigma and got all of my belts and eventually got my black belt. But implementation explicitly involves people-oriented change management to guide those teams through transformation. It really relies on engaged leadership to build that cultural acceptance and to ensure that the changes are sustainable. And it prioritizes employee training. I mean, I remember going through this, and there was a lot of training. It was um, grilling at times, but that you have that active participation and team-based problem solving is at kind of the core. And so, even in a data-driven approach like Six Sigma, it's clear that people, culture, and behaviors are kind of really what brings this methodology to life. And Ron, I know that you are a big Six Sigma guy.
Well, you know, I do a lot of the statistical analysis and going through the DMAIC process. And to your point, the tools are important, but they're a very small part of it. When it comes to people, that's 90% of the improvement. And that's why I got so enamored with this respect for people, because I can see how it fits in and actually creates uh the benefits that it creates in order for us to actually implement and sustain gains. I think that anybody that's done a lot of continuous improvement has felt the pains of going in and making improvements and then seeing them rapidly fall apart because we didn't include everyone that needed to be. And when we started looking at some of the behaviors of respect for people, seeking to understand, I found this in myself. A lot of times I'm listening to respond as opposed to listening to understand. And when you start listening to understand, you really get to a deeper root cause of some of the problems that are actually occurring. And it doesn't matter whether the person is an engineer or new on the job. We've got to value those people because different sets of eyes see different things. Now, as we begin working and making those improvements, celebrating some of the small wins are equally as important as the overall improvements that have taken place. And that and the ability to lead with humility. I know Bruce spoke of respect for people, but leading with humility as well is something that when I see that in teams, I see growth happening. And it was just the other day that was working on a um, a new product introduction for, of all things, some cables going into space for Blue Origin, and they had to make 100 of these cables, and the communication wasn't there, and they got a few, they probably got a half a dozen cables in, and QC wasn't clear on what the actual specifications were, and the people that were building these products were getting very, very frustrated, and engineering came in and they said, you need to pull everybody together. And when they did, the first thing that engineer did is he led off with vulnerability. He came in and he said, listen, I take responsible for everything that's happened so far, but we just got to fix this. And that kind of set the stage for everyone, dropping their defense mechanisms and beginning to work together. And within 20 minutes, they had a specific process they were trying to move forward to satisfy the customer's needs. And that's the people portion of it, in my estimation, that we really need to focus on. And that's why I see, the benefits of this respect for people. It's starting to break down those barriers, increase the learnings. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. That was great. Great story. Great example. The other one that sometimes people often ask me about is the theory of constraints. While it's often focused on kind of the system bottlenecks and the process flows, it also places kind of a strong emphasis on the people-oriented leadership behaviors that drive kind of that meaningful change. Theory of constraints really relies on collaborative problem solving and clear, open communication to surface kind of and address those constraints. Very similar to the story that you shared is, the people, everyone has to kind of come to that openness to talk about, okay, well, here is where the problem actually is. And, in theory of constraint, leaders are expected to engage their teams to build trust, to encourage that dialogue, to really uncover those root causes of where those bottlenecks are. And just like other kind of CI approaches, it recognizes that the cultural engagement is really essential. Without it, identifying and resolving constraints becomes just almost impossible. And so I remember, reading the goal a few years ago, and just that the story of Jonah and how he didn't necessarily give the answers, but he brought people to him you know to identify where the problems were and help them kind of engage them to solve problems. So I don't know if any of you guys have experience with theory of constraints or have a story you want to share, but
So Scott, as a plant manager, also quite a few years ago, uh, my first exposure to continuous improvement was the goal and Ellie Goldratt. And, for the most part, when we're talking about those constraints and people think of bottlenecks and they think of what he referred to as a logistical bottleneck. There's a wall in the way or the layout is wrong. And those are certainly important. But the thing that struck me, being in a plant that's spoke 9 languages, English not really being the major language, was what Ellie Goldratt referred to as behavioral constraints. That we had a tendency to kind of assign importance and intelligence to people, let's say, with degrees after their names. And my discovery, as a plant manager, was that the smartest people are the people who are right there doing the work. And so one of our biggest constraints was that behavioral constraint. Once we got beyond that, we could really start to deal with the logistical constraints.
Yeah, yeah. And as you know, we talk a lot about that in the Respect for People roadmap. That we sometimes create these artificial constraints on ourselves just because of the way we're seeing things, or seeing others, or seeing kind of the situation that's in front of us. So yeah, thank you for that. What I'd like to do now is, before we kind of get into some of the details, I'm really interested in what brings the people who are watching this webinar. What brings you here? What brings you to this webinar? Are you thinking about implementing CI? Are you struggling with sustainability or resistance? If you want to maybe just drop in the chat, what is bringing you here? What is the curiosity that has brought you here, or what is the problem that you're trying to solve? What is it that you're hoping to gain, or what is it that you're hoping to get from this webinar? What's the nugget that you would like to take away? And I can tell you, having done this several times, there's a few common things that I often hear across organizations. As people share with me that they're struggling with making it stick, or they might say that just people are too busy. It's a huge perceived barrier that people feel kind of overwhelmed and or even undervalued in the work that they're doing. Um, Looks like we've got a few here. Um, so let's see. So how to approach a consulting opportunity to what the client really is looking for. Yeah. Um,
To establish a basic culture needed to
yeah, great.
implement a CI journey.
Yeah.
We've got engaging all levels of staff in CQI and getting leaders let go of preconceived notions.
Yeah. And I know leadership comes up a lot in these conversations. How are we going to get leaders to model the behaviors that we want? We kind of know where we want to go, but how do we get others to do this? Um, and then, yeah, I see strategies for implementing a CI culture, building better problem solving. Yeah, those are all great ones. Yeah, so these are all some of the things that, as we kind of looked at what is it that we're trying to do around the culture piece? These are lots of the things that we considered in this. Let me move this forward. So just what all of these frameworks have in common is that they provide kind of this structured, process-driven approach to transformation. And they help organizations map out problems, streamline their operations, and improve performance. But here's what else they have in common is that they often point to culture as a critical success factor, they usually offer very little guidance on how to actually engage the workforce for making this thing happen. Even sometimes, we will engage the workforce with the tools or the process improvements, but then we see things like resistance or misalignment, burnout, or lack of trust that can unintentionally or quietly derail even the most well-designed improvement efforts. And without that piece, the impact really doesn't last. And so uh, it's these workplace dynamics, the ones that often go unspoken, that tend to stall continuous improvement, or weaken execution, or even erode our results over time. And so resistance is the first sign that your people aren't ready for continuous improvement or process improvement, or some change. It sounds a lot like some of the things that are on this slide. And how often do we hear some of these statements? And I know Melinda, you and Ron and Bruce, you've probably heard many of these and many more of these over the years of implementation.
Yeah,
Could I share just Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Melinda.
Well, I was just going to say, and you see this both from those who are doing the work and those who are trying to help with doing the work, that you
Yeah.
get caught in this paradigm of what you think your solution is. And so this listening, no one's listening to me because I've got a great idea. You see that pervasive. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I could just share a quick example. This is again for my job as a plant manager. There was a guy in my welding department, and kind of a tough guy, and pretty smart, but was not buying in. And I asked him one point why he wouldn't participate more, and his response to me was, "You earn the big bucks, you figure it out." And this was a real, poke because he understood what was going on and he was looking for some respect. Like, I know my job. So what he was saying was really, I didn't take it as a negative. I took it as the beginning, as the start of a conversation. And he turned out to be one of our biggest continuous improvement people ultimately. We actually used that in one of our videos because it stuck out in my mind. You earn the big bucks, you figure it out.
Yeah. 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 Or, it's above my pay grade. So, not my problem.
Yeah.
Heard that a lot too. Yeah. Thank you, Bruce.
Well,
Um,
I think that one of the other things
yeah, go ahead.
is that we don't ask people enough. How often as leaders do we say, what can we do to make your job easier?
Mhm.
As opposed to get off your phone and get back to work. It's got to be, how do we make your job a little bit easier today? And a lot of times people look at you like a deer in the headlights. It's like, I don't know, nobody's ever asked me that question.
Mhm.
But that's, we get these answers of it's not my job because we're not asking them how to improve their jobs on a regular
Yeah.
basis.
Yeah, totally.
Thanks.
Right. So that just reminded me of another story. Recently, I was in an organization, and a leader said, "Hey, I don't pay you to talk. I pay you to do." And it reminds me of some of the conversations I've had with people at Toyota, where they say on the one of the first days that they showed up, the leader said, "I pay you to think, not to put parts on cars." And the guy said, "Well, wait a minute. I thought you hired me as an assembler." He goes, "I did, but I'm paying you to think. What you're doing is putting parts on cars, but I'm paying you to think." And I think that just that dynamic, that thinking, that mindset is just so completely different, right? And so, and that's a little bit of what we're trying to get to. Um, well, and so, when we talk about resistance, resistance is really rooted in low engagement. It can seriously undermine the success of really any change effort or continuous improvement effort. And that kind of resistance, whether it shows up as reluctance or avoidance or indifference, it really runs directly counter to what the change or the CI efforts really need. Um, we want proactive participation, trust, openness, and a willingness to experiment and learn. And without engaged people, even the best tools and processes really just won't get you there, and won't get you where you need to go. And so I often use this picture, and I know you guys have seen this several times, but misalignment is another issue that stalls continuous improvement. And, this is a funny picture. And often when I ask people, what's the first word that comes to mind when you see that, the most people who encounter this scenario believe that the worker was lazy. That's the most common response, is that he's lazy. If I share a little bit of the story though, but uh, you know, um, before that incident, that operator, John, was known as a high performer, someone who consistently did good work. And on the morning that he painted that crooked line, his boss gave him an ultimatum, said, "Hit your mileage quota or start looking for a new job." And so, with that context, you might look at that white line a little differently. It's not just a mistake. It's really a snapshot of a system under pressure where fear replaced communication and performance was measured without really understanding kind of the challenges that the worker was facing. And so, in this scenario, there are three types of misalignment that make it really difficult for a worker to deliver high quality work. There's goal misalignment, there's leadership misalignment, there's values and operational reality misalignment. When the values on the wall don't match what actually is happening on the ground. Um, And so when these misalignments are in play, people aren't gonna no one's gonna stop and focus on quality if they're being measured by output. They won't take the time to troubleshoot if they're expected to follow orders without question. They won't speak up if no one else is, and especially if they're seeing that doing that comes with some risk, if speaking up comes with some risk, and ultimately they resist change if they don't believe their ideas are heard or valued. This isn't a people problem. This is a system and culture problem. And if we want better results, we have to really align what we say, what we measure, and how we lead change efforts. Um, and so, which kind of brings me to the low engagement, because the behaviors we just described are often what low engagement actually looks like. And the important thing to remember is these behaviors won't change just because you introduce a new process improvement initiative, or that you change the flow of a process. That fundamental underlying constraint is still going to be there. In a low engagement environment, continuous improvement simply it doesn't stick. It doesn't take hold, and that's because people may be unwilling or really unable to sustain whatever those new behaviors are, or they can't collaborate or communicate effectively. They for whatever reason they can't take on or adopt that change, or they can't even take real ownership of the process. So without addressing really the root cause of the disengagement, these continuous improvement efforts, they just stay surface level. They're short-lived. And ultimately they're just not effective. It's not enough to change the process. You have to engage people who make the process work. And so if you're seeing any of these signs in your workplace, there's a good chance you're facing an engagement issue, and it's likely impacting your improvement efforts, maybe even more than you realize. And we see these kind of show up in two ways. There's kind of like this passive withdrawal, and that might show up as like avoiding interactions, or maybe passing the buck. And then we see active withdrawal, and that often shows up as like these negative attitudes. So you have this ongoing criticism, or the cynicism, or this lots of complaining about coworkers or leaders or the initiative itself. Absenteeism, lower productivity and quality, a noticeable drop in performance or attention to detail, and then just limited collaboration, avoiding teamwork, or withholding information, or that maybe that person isolates from his colleagues. These aren't just signs of discontent; they're really barriers to improvement. If these behaviors are showing up, it's not just a process problem. It's really a signal to a deeper culture and leadership and trust issue. And so, what so why are we talking so much about behavior and culture in terms of continuous improvement success? Is because what we've discovered is that behind every lasting change effort or continuous improvement effort is not just the tools and processes that make it work. It's the day-to-day behaviors and the culture um, that really kind of underlines the behaviors that create and determine whether that continuous improvement effort thrives or fades out over time. So in my work, when I was struggling with transformation, and facing resistance or misalignment and maybe lower morale, I found myself going back to uh, some often overlooked pillars, and went back to kind of the respect for people, and I really tried to understand what was going on there. And I tried to decode what that practice meant, what respect for people meant. Um, and I started looking at it through the lens of kind of how Toyota was talking about it. I came to see that their success really wasn't just about tools or processes. It was about the people and how they treated and engaged with each other. And so what I observed was that Toyota employees consistently did three things particularly well. They saw behaviors more objectively, without rushing to judgment, without making assumptions. They just saw, that line in the road. They saw that a lot more objectively, and got curious about it. They valued the entirety of a person's experience, not just their role or their output or their title. And then they connected people to kind of this collective wisdom for this mutual benefit, really creating a culture of shared learning and support, bringing people together. And that realization, realizing that hit me hard, because these were the exact cultural conditions missing in so many of the organizations that I saw struggling, not just with sustaining continuous improvement, but also with performance and engagement, and really the long-term resilience that I know the organizations were trying to build. And without really that foundation of respect, improvement just doesn't have anywhere to land. And so by reverse engineering what I was seeing, and what some of the organizations that I was working in, what they weren't doing enough of, and then combining that with kind of the hallmarks of that Toyota culture, I started to see kind of a clearer pattern. It led me to define the cultural conditions I believe the organizations needed to build if they truly wanted to reach that level of employee satisfaction and engagement and performance that they were really trying to get to. And that's where the three principles of kind of the respect for people roadmap came in, which we'll talk about in a minute. But they weren't just these ideas; they were practices I began to kind of encourage my client organizations to build into their day-to-day leadership and culture. And so each of them is supported by these are supported by core behaviors. And so, seeing behaviors more objectively, valuing the entirety of a person's experience, and connecting to collective wisdom. Behind those, I started to kind of unravel if I were to teach somebody that, what would that be? What would those behaviors be? And so, we know that every organization wants their people to better see and solve problems, but doing that well requires more than just these good intentions or these quick fixes. Solving the right problem in the right way takes kind of big picture thinking, not just reacting or jumping to conclusions. And so when we started thinking about the behaviors that support more objective thinking, and the steps needed to reframe how we approach problems, it led us to three key habits. The first one was to check your perspective, to slow down, get curious, and examine your assumptions. Are you seeing the full picture, or are you just seeing a slice of it, kind of like the line in the road? Are you just seeing the line in the road, or are you seeing kind of what's behind the line in the road? The second is to seek to understand. So again, getting curious, ask questions, listen more deeply, kind of like what Ron was sharing earlier, and take the time to really understand what's going on. And then the third one was act of support. And so instead of fixing the problem for the sake of fixing, act in ways that really help others kind of move forward. And so together, these three behaviors, or these three skills, we thought of these as habits that form kind of the foundation for what we call engaging with compassion. It's really the first principle in the Respect for People roadmap, and it's where we think effective problem solving and meaningful collaboration really begins. Um, and so, so the goal of engaging with compassion is to move from reactive to reflective problem solving by really learning to recognize and diffuse the judgment that skews decision making and really strains these team dynamics. And I want to give some of the others on the call to kind of just share their experience about this as well.
Well, I could just add, Scott, that
Yeah.
very commonplace, and again, I'm going back to my previous lifetime, but also today as a consultant, person's first reaction tends to be uh, negative. Mr. Shingo, one of my teachers, like to say that 99% of objection is cautionary, and that stuck with me. So I've spent a lot of time trying to check my perspective. When somebody blasts me when I'm presenting a new idea, I step back, I'm examining what they're really saying is, no, I want to know. I'm not sure I trust you yet. I need to understand more. You need to share more with me. So rather than just shooting back a jibe at them, I'm going to spend a little more time trying to understand where they're coming from, just like the guy with the white line on the road.
Mhm.
I think that's important.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Bruce. And it reminds me of kind of the Ono circle. What was he really doing there? He's saying, hey, when you first walk through, you see something, but do you really know what's going on there? It's only in sitting with it for a while and really observing and really taking it in and understanding that you start to understand kind of really what's going on. So yeah, thank you.
I have an example I wanted
Oh
to
yeah.
share of trying to improve safety and doing that with some behavioral observation. And we noticed that there was an individual who was not following lockout tagout procedures.
Mm.
And our gut reaction was, well, that deserves some sort of a consequence. When we suspended, though, the judgment on that, and we really talked to a number of managers and leaders and individual contributors in the organization, what we found was that there was this systemic assumption that safe enough was good enough.
Mm.
And that what was happening was not the actual behavior that we were seeing, but just what we had been telling individuals about the importance of getting going and reducing our cycle time and trying to be efficient. And this person was trying to do the best that they could given the system.
Mm.
And it was that shift, that suspension of judgment, and then compassionately looking for why that helped us to get there.
Yeah, very nice story. Thank you, Melinda. So, moving on to the next kind of pillar in this, valuing the entirety of a person's experience. So when we think about our coworkers, it's easy to kind of fall into the trap of assuming that competence is directly tied to someone's title, status, or role, but that mindset can cause us to overlook really um, the uniqueness or the depth of a person's life experience, their perspective, and maybe the non-technical strengths that someone might bring to the job, especially when they're in a less visible or less celebrated or less notable position. And so reflecting on what it means to truly see and value the whole person, not just what they do, but who they are, led us to kind of three core behaviors that we wanted to get into practice. And the first one was prioritizing well-being and really recognizing that people do their best work when their physical, their emotional, their psychological needs are supported. The second was around valuing individuality and really appreciating the unique mix of strengths, experiences, and viewpoints and capabilities that each person brings. Sometimes people have capabilities beyond just the task that they're doing or the role that they're doing in that moment, but knowing that can really be the difference when you're problem solving. And then spotlighting others, appreciating and showing gratitude for who people are, not just kind of what they do. It's about recognizing those personal qualities, those contributions, and maybe those everyday actions that make a difference, especially the ones that often go unnoticed. And so together, these behaviors kind of led us to thinking about valuing the entirety of a person's experience. And we call this treating people like they matter. It's not a theory, but it's how we show up for one another every day. And so together, these behaviors translated to what we call, again, treating people like they matter. They enable us to more clearly see and call on the talent and expertise in the people around us. And so the goal of treating people like they matter is to shift people from the isolation of indifference and away from the stress of feeling like they have to solve everything on their own towards more inclusive, connected interactions. It's really about creating a culture where people reach out, recognize one another's value, and tap into that expertise around them, knowing that they're not alone in the work and that there's real collaboration and that we're trying to create real respect. And that's kind of where it begins. So really, this principle is about recalibrating our perceptions of who and what is valuable and who is qualified to solve problems so that people can feel more comfortable and prepared to really effectively collaborate. So don't know if anyone wants to share their experience of this principle.
Let me chime in for a moment here, because I find that we do a lot of project work with teams, and you know the the natural sub the natural groups are okay for solving some of the problems that are in their areas, but the cross-functional teams, not only in different areas, but different levels within the organization, have a
Mm.
tendency to come up with much better
Mhm.
improvement opportunities and initiatives. And it's just by the time they get together and they gel for a little while, that camaraderie really bonds and they become a superpower, and they're talking to each other and they're talking to different groups and they're really expanding their horizons. And it eliminates some of that, that inclusion or the lack of inclusion, I should say, of you get stuck in your role and I get stuck in my role. That's
Yeah.
what I found, anyways.
Yeah. Thank you, Ron. That's great.
You see it connected to problem solving. Because if we're just looking at a list of roles and we say, well, we want a cross-functional team to go solve a problem, et cetera, that's one thing. But when I know Joe and I know Nancy and I know exactly what they've done, but also what they've done previous to the role they've had, I might call up someone who isn't on my list of roles, but is on my list of people that
Yeah.
really should be involved in solving this particular problem.
Yeah. Thank you, Melinda. That's great. And so moving on to the third pillar here. So this was where we kind of saw, connecting to that collective wisdom. And so the way we communicate, what we choose to share, or how open we are to different perspectives or different opinions doesn't just shape our individual effort. It really directly impacts our collective success. It affects how we support our teammates. It affects how we solve problems together, and whether we ever get to the kind of alignment or innovation that moves not only our team but our organization forward. And so when we started to think about the skills needed to truly collaborate across these different boundaries, with people beyond kind of the usual go-to voices that we often tap into, it led us to three key behaviors. The first one was showing your cards. So being open about kind of your intentions, your challenges, your goals to build, trust and transparency. The second one was about speaking with candor, and so it's some people think speaking with candor is just being direct, but there's a connection to how direct you are to how much you care for that person, and so it's about communicating directly and kindly, even when it's uncomfortable, so that people can take real action when it's needed. And then the third one was getting on the same page, and so this one was really about prioritizing dialogue over debate to create kind of that shared understanding, alignment, and commitment. And so together, these behaviors formed kind of the foundation of what we call partnering for mutual benefit, where collaboration becomes a habit, not just kind of a hope or a slogan. And so partnering for mutual benefit is how teams really work their way up to what we think innovation. The goal of partnering for mutual benefit is to shift from conflict to collaboration, not just solving problems together, but fundamentally changing the way we relate to each other. It's about moving beyond that transactional, maybe that tit for tat interaction towards a real partnership mindset, one that sees collaboration as a chance to co-create some outcome that really benefits everybody. That benefits the employee, the company, the suppliers, the customer, rather than just competing for resources or credit or control. When we adopt this mindset, we stop asking, what's in it for me, and we start asking, what's possible if we work together. That's where I think real progress starts to begin. And so it's really a good bridge now to the continuous improvement side of things as well. Um, Anybody want to share anything about their experience of partner for mutual benefit?
Well, this ties right into the Shingo principles relating to alignment, Scott, which is for some organizations really a very tough thing to do. The siloed organizations, and so the systems are not tied together, and the interpersonal relationships are not there. And even if people want to work together, they just don't know how. So I think this is a collaboration is really what moves an entire organization ahead. All
Yeah,
these people were rowing at different rates, that boat would be going nowhere.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so, that kind of leads us into thinking about how to scale these principles and behaviors so that organizations can more quickly effectively and more sustainably implement continuous improvement. And so that led us to create what we call the Respect for People roadmap. And so we designed the Respect for People roadmap to really address a lot of the challenges that people are facing with their continuous improvement implementations, whatever methodology. And so learning is shaped around kind of this road trip through the what we call the Respect for People landscape. And as participants start exploring the principles and practicing the behaviors that lead to what we call the state of better, and everyone has a chance to define that at the very beginning of the program. And so our approach to implementation addresses the pitfalls of of the conventional methods, in that it includes the entire organization from the C-suite to the front line. So we thought about this from not just leaders, what leaders need to do, but what do frontline employees need to do. And so we made it something that was systematic. It was a systematic solution versus kind of this ad hoc skill building, that we wanted it to be based in the application of kind of universal standards. And we wanted it to be a plug and play program versus a framework that you have to kind of find resources to apply it. And most importantly, we grounded it in behavioral science, and we give people very specific, actionable, and observable ways to apply, internalize, and embed the behaviors across the organization. One of the challenges that we know that we uncovered was that traditionally, when we want to make change, we take the leaders off site, we give them a lecture style training. They might remember 5 or 10% of what they've learned. Then we expect them to internalize it, model those behaviors, and then bring that back to the organization, and then cascade that, and then expect them to do their normal day jobs. That's just not realistic, and that's one of the reasons a lot of change efforts don't happen, is that it's just not scalable in that way. And so our approach, our goal is, again, systematic change, culture change interventions that are designed to really be systematically focused, where we're bringing these new behaviors, we're bringing these new mindsets to every level of the organization. So, unlike some of the ad hoc skill building, and there's nothing wrong with some of the different skills, communication skills or leadership skills, but when they're ad hoc, they don't integrate kind of systematically across the organization. And so that was one challenge that we wanted to overcome. The second thing I drew on, again, I drew on my own operations experience to kind of create a standard that could be broken down into these repeatable steps that could be executed reliably and consistently for everyone in the organization. And what we wanted to do is create kind of a practical framework around these ideas, and so that every employee kind of at every level of the organization got kind of a shared and common experience. And so the roadmap, the Respect for People roadmap, gives organizations this common path and really a common language. It creates a common lexicon, something that can be reinforced in the day-to-day, not just talked about in workshops or meetings. It's not just a leadership program. It's designed for everyone. It's really about personal learning and organizational growth, and it's a program that people can practice and do. So it's everyone every day, and I know that's one of your slogans, everyone every day. And this was really an intention to create something that was for everyone and every day. So the third aspect that I mentioned is that we often see with a lot of traditional CI implementations is that they provide some baseline training, maybe a workshop or a few sessions, but most of what is learned is quickly forgotten. The experience is usually too compressed or too theoretical or too disconnected from daily work to create lasting change. So with this Respect for People roadmap, we set out to do it differently by really building a program that draws from the best of learning science to create this holistic and blended learning experience. And so we're combining the theoretical knowledge with practical application. We're taking individual reflections and combining that with group learning. We're trying to create interactive engagement with real world practice. And so we're tapping into habit theory, the power of learning in social environments, and really the momentum that comes from seeing others you engage with doing this work as well. So rather than cramming everything into kind of a single workshop, the roadmap intentionally spaces learning over time, really giving people the opportunity to reflect, to apply it, and to internalize what they're learning, and to be able to put it into practice. So it goes way beyond just raising kind of awareness. It helps people actually build new habits and new skills that hopefully stick. And that's what makes this learning last and a little bit more sustaining. And then finally, we built it around an online platform that connects the participants to the content and to each other and to their facilitator mentors. We call them the travel guides. And it really is meant to create a fully integrated learning experience. And once the participants receive their login, they have access to the roadmap really anytime from any smart device or computer. And we're trying to make it easy to fit it into kind of the rhythm of people's days. And then a unique and powerful feature of this program is the role of that facilitator mentor. Unlike kind of some traditional training programs, participants don't go through the learning alone. They're really supported not only by a coach who guides and reflects them, but by the other participants in the program. So there's kind of this shared learning experience. And so the facilitator coach responds to insights and really helps connect the learning to the real work. It's in that relationship that often makes the biggest difference in helping those behaviors take root. And I know Melinda is one of the mentors for this program as well. I don't know if you want to share your experience as a mentor.
Well, it really is, like you said, it's all about creating an experience and this connection that you have with the learner and as a learner with the mentor. So it's really different than any other training program, because as you move through it, um, you're advancing your thoughts and your ideas, and so you're scratching the surface in the beginning, but by the time you're into the program, you're really having these deep and important conversations with one another about the concepts. I've learned as much from being a mentor as I have in taking the experience as well. So I see the value that it's having for individuals that participate.
Yeah, excellent. And I know we have a few minutes if we want to take some questions.
Yeah, feel free, anybody, to put your questions into chat.
And while we're getting ready to field some questions, I'll drop a few QR codes on you here. The first one is the website, obviously, the GBMP, which you may already have. If you wanted to check it out, I think, Melinda, you dropped it in the chat as well, but there's also a QR code. You can scan that and it'll take you to a demo. It'll let you do about 8 of the 72 stops that are in the program. So it's just a little sampling. I can tell you that stops 3 and 4 are there's a little Easter egg in there if you can get that far. And if you want to just ask some more questions, there's Jamie's email too. You can reach out to him. Melinda, do you want to talk about the upcoming cohort?
Oh, I'd love to. So for this summer, we're kicking off an open enrollment for the Respect for People roadmap. It starts on June 3rd, and it's an hour and a half on the dates that are there on the slide. We've spaced them 3 weeks apart because we know individuals take vacations and you'll want some time to really digest and enjoy the content. I've had a lot of people say that they enjoy the content so much that it feels like a vacation. So maybe you would take it along with you to listen to or engage with. And we'll continue. And by the end of the summer, September 16th will be the last date. You will have been fully immersed in the experience. So I hope you'll join me and join those of us who will be on the journey together.
And then the last thing I wanted to share is that if you are going to be at Shingo, and I'll let maybe Bruce share here, but we're going to have a little get together at Shingo.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I think everybody, all of us, Melinda, Ron, and I will all be at the 37th Shingo conference out in Provo, Utah, and that's not exactly around the corner for all of you, but maybe some of you are close by. We'd love to have you come by. We actually have a session with Scott on the night before the conference where we'll have you'll have an opportunity to kind of meet the creator of this software, talk with us, learn a little bit more about the Shingo model as well. So it's an excellent opportunity. Hope we'll see you there.
Yeah, excellent. And I know that if people wanted to do this, that there are some grant programs in a variety of different states. I know certainly Massachusetts covers it. I know California covers it, but there's several states that cover some of the cost of this if people needed some financial support as well. And if you do want to explore that, I'd reach out to Jamie. He'd be a great contact for you. I didn't see any questions, Melinda. Did any questions come in?
No questions came in. No.
Okay. Well, that means we must have been so profound that we've pre-answered the questions before people could even ask them. So
That's right.
If I could just one other thing is, a lot of people think, well, this got these six, meetings that we have and a little bit of work, but it's more of a journey. And even at the end of the cohort, you've got meetings that are set out for the next 30, 60, 90 days to continue along the journey itself. So it's not just a finite portion of time that you're spending. It's an adventure. It really is.
yeah,
Join us.
yeah. Well, thank you. And with that, thank you all for participating and being here today and learning about kind of how we're connecting, these different continuous improvement methodologies to culture and respect for people. And we really hope to see you in June on the journey with us. So thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.